had an experience where I was on a plane and I thought the plane was going to crash. Not just me, but everybody on the plane thought it was going to crash. So yeah, great being here with you already. I'm enjoying the kind of just a friendly environment. And I remember when Pranigosha asked me to come back, I was like, oh yeah, I like being in this space with you all. So yeah. So I'm been asked to speak about becoming reality, and this is on the. There's been two other talks, which I don't know what they were, but you can tell me. What were the first two talks?
First talk about hearing about reality.
Hearing about reality.
And then the second talk was reflecting.
Reflecting on reality. Thank you. So I'm in the last in a series. Looking at hearing reality, so hearing about the teachings, hearing about what Buddhism says, reflecting on it, and I'm talking about becoming it. What's it mean, becoming reality? Actually, the word becoming was a thing that struck me first, and I thought of, there's a book, famous, best-selling book by Michelle Obama, called Becoming. And really she's talking about her life. She's talking about her life, all the events in her life, all the things she's done, all the things that have happened, things she set about creating. And then, of course, she became the first lady of the first black president in the States, and then that experience. So I was thinking about, that was the thing that struck me, the word becoming. And what does it mean? Well, it means it's a process. Anything that's in a process of change or transformation, anything where you're bringing something into being, perhaps that wasn't there before. So, beginning of the year, we're at the beginning of the year, and we've had a meditation challenge at the London Buddhist Centre, and you've had one here as well. And we meditate. We start meditating, we continue, we pick up our practice again because we want to bring something into being. Usually with meditation, something from the inside out. We know we need to do something within in order to have something else happen in our lives. And I gave a talk at the London Buddhist Centre on Monday night as well on obstacles, overcoming obstacles and challenges. And, I was in part of that, preparing for that, I found the statistics about the New Year, New Year's resolutions, because at the beginning of the year, we often start new things. We want to bring something into being for the course of our year. And so we set, 40% of adults in America set resolutions. And that's their way of kind of marking, this is what I want, this year to be. So 40% of adults, younger people set more resolutions than older people, which was interesting. I saw the statistics on how many of us, let's say, keep our resolutions and aspirations. So apparently after the first week of setting our resolutions, about under 25% of people give them up within the first week. And only, I think it's at something like 38% have kept them to the first month. So it's like just under half people have kept them to the first month. But by the end of the year, it's only 9%. Less than 1 in 10 people keep resolutions and aspirations of those that set them. So I thought that was really interesting. And I began to think, well, what's happening here? What's actually going on here? And I'm interested. How many of you have ever set resolutions or aspirations? Yeah. So most of us have in some way. And how many of you always keep your resolutions and aspirations? Yeah. I'm not putting my hand up either. So it shows to me that the process of bringing something into being, even something that we know might be good for us, might be helpful, that we want, is not so straightforward. It's actually quite complex. There's a lot that goes on in trying to bring something into being, especially that wasn't there before. So yeah, and I think that process of bringing something to being happens at every level of our lives, every level of life itself. Personally, it happens personally. We've got all kinds of things we want to bring into being, and then it also happens collectively as well. So from just I don't know, local area. There's all kinds of things that go on in the local area, politics, local, national, international politics, science, the arts, business, families, friendship groups, communities. There's all these collective spaces where, at some point in time, someone says, hey, let's do this, yeah? We need to bring this thing into being. And, there's quite a few common things involved, regardless, really, of whether it's a personal thing or a collective thing, regardless of whether it's a small thing or a mass scale experience. So firstly, the first thing is, things come into being because there's some kind of sense of a need. There's a need, there's a desire, there might be a pressure as well, a pressure of something has to change. A problem sometimes comes in as well. So there's either a need or desire, a pressure or a problem that's presented, and then you're then faced with, okay, what we're going to do. So there's that's the first thing. And then, once you've got the problem or the pressure or the need or the desire, then it's like, okay, how do we respond to that need, desire, pressure, problem? So usually there's some kind of ideas are generated, or feelings happen, or imagination, you envision, in organisations and things, you brainstorm what we're going to do, so yeah, something is generated in response to the need, desire. And then sometimes you need to get other people engaged as well, on board with that. So there's a kind of sense of shared like, okay, I think this is important. I need you to think it's important as well. Either help me with it, or support me with it, or don't get in the way of me doing this. There's other people come on board in some way or other around that thing that you wanted to come into being. And then you take some action. You decide on what is the action that is going to help us meet that need, desire, in order to bring this thing into being. You see what the action, okay, you take the action, then you check, well, what happened then? You take more action. So in that sense, it's that's not rocket science, as it were. It's so we know sort of that. We've all done it in many ways in our lives. So in that sense, it's kind of straightforward. And that goes right back, this process of becoming, learning and becoming and discovering. I mean, it goes all the way back right to the very first discoveries of human beings, discovering fire. At some point somebody must have said, I'm cold. What are we going to do? Or a wheel, this discovery of the wheel. Like, okay, there's another way of doing this and carrying this thing. So, it happens on it's a very fundamental, actually, to us as human beings. But what we also know, so in a way, it's not sort of massively difficult what the process is. But actually, we do know that the kind of outcome, and whether it's going to be achieved or not, and what that actually looks like, you can't really predict. It's uncertain. It's very, very varied what the outcome is going to be. Whether it's going to happen at all, whether it's going to happen in a way that you're happy with, whether it's going to happen in a way that causes issues. It's very, very varied. So that's where the complexity is. Our New Year's resolutions and aspirations show us that, of that, 9% that, achieved it to the end of the year, they've all got stories about that process. It probably might not have been exactly what they anticipated, and you yourself will know that. So whilst the kind of plan, if you like, of bringing something to being might be quite straightforward, as in you can write it, but I'm going to do 4 things to bring this thing into being. The actual process and what actually happens is very varied indeed. And why is that? That's what I was asking myself. Why is it so actually complex? Well, firstly, what we discover in the process of bringing something into being, and you'll know this from your own lives, is that sometimes the outcome that we find at the end of getting the outcome, it doesn't always end up meeting the need that we started off with. We thought, that relationship, I went into this relationship because of this, I went to that job because of this, it's not given me that. So that's one thing that happens. Sometimes, there's just unintended consequences from the kind of pursuit, from the kind of process, or even from the outcome as well. There's just some things that think, I've got the thing, but I've also, along with that thing, I've also got this and this and this. So unintended consequences can happen as well. Sometimes we discover when we're in the process that our motives are very mixed. And that can cause conflict. Actually, I think we often start off with mixed motives for things. I think that's kind of quite normal in a sense to do so. But then what happens is it can then create conflicts, and we then always don't know how to sort of manage that, because it pulls us, as mixed motives will at some point pull us in slightly different directions. Sometimes we've just got unrealistic expectations, so our needs aren't necessarily met, partly because we realise, gosh, I just expected something much more than the thing could actually give me, and that's what happens as well. Sometimes I think we lose, in the process of achieving whatever it is, we lose the sense of why we started the journey in the first place. What was our initial inspiration? Why am I here? How did I get here? And that's because we just lost sight of that kind of vision that we had. So sometimes we can't foresee the circumstances, or the consequences. So Michelle Obama, when she started dating President, then before, what's his name? Barack. Like they're friends. When they started dating Barack, she was kind of like, he's handsome, he's smart. She wasn't imagining that one day she's going to end up in the White House. And even when that whole process started, and they were trying to become the first lady and the president, she probably didn't imagine what it would actually be like to be that first lady. Yeah, that people should be scrutinized, and she just couldn't foresee that. Which is very normal as well. We can't always foresee, what's going to happen and how others are going to respond, because we live in a world where we're very deeply interconnected. So, we might have this wonderful outcome for ourselves, and then it's there in the world, and other people have a response to it. Yeah. So lots of different things can happen when we set out to bring things into being. It's not a straightforward process. It's deeply complex, in fact. I met somebody once who, one of their relatives had invented Tupperware. And it was really interesting. I mean, I thought I've never thought about who invented Tupperware. If you're young, Tupperware is a plastic. You all know Tupperware. I never know these days. It's like plastic containers. But I am old enough to know that they used to have Tupperware parties, where they would bring people together, and you'd get pineapple and cheese on a stick, and whatever beverage. And the whole idea was to come together and sell Tupperware. and it was like an exciting event. And I just think, wow, that used to happen. What she said to me was that I can't remember if it was a grandfather or an uncle, but he deeply regretted creating it. Because what he didn't foresee, maybe he did, maybe he didn't foresee the extent to which it would be part of the problem now of the environment. He didn't create plastic, but he created a form of it that meant it was in everybody's homes. So we don't always know what's going to happen when we set out on creating things or bringing things into being. So the other thing about this process of creating or bringing things into being is, it's so fundamental to who we are as human beings, really. We sort of, in a way, our lives start off that way. We're born, we're learning to bring speech into being, we're learning to walk, we're learning to do things. It's just part of how we're functioning, how we are operating. And then, I don't know, a teacher says, what do you want to be when you grow up? And you go, oh, I want to be this, and so you're already starting to imagine certain things for yourself. So it's very fundamental. And a lot of our, as a society, a lot of our attention is on the becoming, is on the creating, is on what you're going to do, like New Year, what are you going to do this year? What's happening? That's often our focus. What we find though, and the older you get, the more this is the case, you find, well, actually, you're always bringing something to being, and then you're on to the next thing, and then you're on to the next thing, and then you're on to the next thing. And actually, it doesn't actually stop until it's all over. I think when I was younger, I used to think that I'll get to a certain point in my life and I'll have done it all. And I would be happy with that. And can stop. This efforting. I think that's what I kind of thought at some point. And that with that kind of, I'd have done it, it would be a sense of, oh, I can relax. I'm kind of fulfilled now. And what I, realised as I got older, oh, hang on a minute, this just seems to keep going. There's not actually, where's the end point? Well, there is an end point, of course, because within this process of becoming that happens and bringing things into being, alongside it, there is also the endings. There is also the things that don't work out. There's also the losses. There's also the kind of dissolution of things. And then, of course, until we get to the final, death, as it were. But we don't put a lot of energy or attention or thought on the endings, which is why we struggle sometimes as well to then deal with that, the job ends, this ends, whatever ends, and then it's a struggle. We don't know how to deal with that, and we don't always have the energy to start up again, yeah? If you've had a great loss, it's really, it really takes time to really absorb that. And then sometimes people are like, come on, get back into it, we don't really have the same kind of appreciation of how to deal with endings, I don't think. But life is a process of bringing things into being. The endings happen. And within that, what's going on? So that was my other question. What's going on? Apart from the survival thing, like we have to do a certain amount to survive, to keep going, yeah? But there's more than that happens in this process. And I think it's because we're just searching. Part of that process is we're searching for the thing that's finally gonna go, I'm fulfilled now. I've arrived. I remember, I'm embarrassed about this now, but I had a teacher, and it was his birthday. We were celebrating his birthday when I was probably about 16. And, I said, how old are you? And he said, I don't know, 33 or something like that. And I was like, wow, great. And he went, I wish I'd sorted it all out. I thought, I really wish I'd sorted my life out. I really need to sort my life out this year. And I was like, what? You haven't sorted your life out. You're 33 and you haven't sorted your life out. And of course, when I got to 33, I was like, oh my gosh. Constant searching. Underneath what a lot of I'm going to do this year, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I want this, I want that. There's this sort of drive. What is it that's like wanting to feel some sense of fulfillment, some sense of, I've arrived, okay, this is it. So there's a word that we use in Buddhism that describes our ordinary world, and that's samsara. Have you heard that word? Samsara. And it's samsara compared to nirvana. Actually, most people have heard the word nirvana. It sounds so lovely, doesn't it? Nirvana actually meaning enlightenment, awakening. But samsara is this word that describes our sort of ordinary life, our ordinary consciousness. And it means, one of the translations of it is continually moving, continually searching, continually looking. It's got that sense of there's something always in flux, yeah? And I think we're doing that because we're trying to meet that a very deep need, a very deep desire that somewhere within ourselves there's this deep desire that we have that can be expressed as I want to do this and I want to do that and I want to do that. But within all of that, underneath all of those desires, there's this kind of fundamental desire to feel fulfilled on some level. To feel that, we're made the most of this experience of life. So there's, because one day we do know it's going to end as well. And that's a challenge, actually. That's a challenge that we're presented with as human beings. We've got all this opportunity to bring things into being if we're fortunate and live in a space where you can really do that. We're not just surviving. You've got all this opportunity to bring things into being within ourselves, in the world, contribute to other people bringing things into being. But one day it's all going to end. And, there's that kind of like searching, that continually moving, so that by that time we've gone, okay, I've done it. I've done whatever this life has promised. There's this nurse who wrote about the 5 regrets of the dying. I don't know if you've heard of that. Some of them were like the 5 biggest regrets. It wasn't a scientific research or anything, but it's just her observations. Things like I wish I'd not worked so hard was one of them. Spent so much time at work, as it were. I wish I'd really thought about what I wanted. And didn't put everybody else's needs, before my own. It was things, like that. But for me, I was thinking that really, I think the dying or the end moment is really where people are looking back and trying to make sense of the lives they've had in some way or other. So. There's obviously tons of activities we've done in that time. For if you get to a good age, lots of activities. Some you won't even remember, But there's been loads of action, loads of things being produced or coming to being in that time. And at the end, though, I think what's fundamentally happening is with people trying to make sense of the experience they have. If you're conscious and able to do that. So, and I think within that, there's a range of experience then. I think there's probably a few common experiences that happen. And one is, there probably is one response to looking back that might be quite defiant or even defensive, which is, I did it my way. the Frank Sinatra approach. Or French singer Edith Piaf, Je ne regrette rien, which means I don't regret anything, you know. I think there's a range of responses that probably fall into that camp, yeah. And then I think there's a range of responses that's just a bit confused, you know, confusing, bewildered, like, oh, I don't know, how have I arrived here? I've still got things to do, and I haven't finished this, and I haven't finished that, and I don't know how to make sense of things now, because here I am, and I can't do things, yeah, or how's this happened, yeah? So I think there's a whole group of responses like that. And then I think, though, there are those responses that are trying, you know, really reflecting, okay, what has this meant? And then possibly posing questions, so that maybe the regrets can fall into that camp, but it can also be, you know, a point of awareness, a point of insight, a point of like a deeper understanding as well. So I had a friend who was in her last days. And I sort of, she's very beautiful, she died quite young, very beautiful young woman, and I was singing her a song, which I sort of made, you know, for her, as it were. And, you know, towards the end, she was, you know, she got very tearful, and, you know, she sort of stopped me right towards the end, and she just said, I wished, because she was in hospice, and so she had lots of visitors coming and going, and she just said, I wished I'd known how well loved I was. And then she said, because maybe I would have loved myself more. And, you know, in a way, you know, and then I led her funeral. And it was a very poignant funeral. So it was also, there's lots of celebration actually in her funeral, because we were like really rejoicing in who she'd been, and that she, you know, she was really well loved by lots of people. But it was also poignant because she hadn't fully been able to do that for herself. But she had that moment of realization, that moment of wisdom, before she died. So in a way that was a gift, you know. You could see it as a regret, but you could, in a way it was a gift, because what she was able to see was the importance of love, you know, and that it went both ways. And she was able to fully have that experience, you know, in her last days. So I really resonated, you know, when she said that, I really resonated with that, because in a way I thought, that's why I started meditating. That's why I started practicing. You know, my interest in I can't even say interest in meditation. I sort of felt like propelled, you know, to look for something, because, you know, I've shared this because it's like my key story as to why I started meditating, because I had an experience where I was on a plane and I thought the plane was going to crash. Not just me, but everybody on the plane thought it was going to crash. And I didn't know how to respond to that, apart from just being terror. And I was in terror, and everybody else was in terror. And I had the experience at that point, where at a certain point in the process, where I looked out at the sky, I looked out at the plane, and I just saw a very beautiful sky, and got absorbed in the colour of the sky. And then when I came back, eventually, you know, came back to the plane, we were still dropping lots of feet, and people were still frightened and crying and all of that. But I felt like my fear had gone. And I felt relaxed. And with this sense of relaxation, I had this clear mind. And within this clear mind emerged this question. And not even a question, it was a question. It was, and I never thought this before consciously. So somehow it came out of this experience. The question was, how do I live so that when I die, I can die without regret? And then the next bit was, how do I love? I knew they were connected somehow. So that's really what got me, looking for something to help me with that question. So it's a moment of realization, and it was a moment where a big question emerged into my consciousness and wouldn't really go. I may have had other questions in the past before that, but for whatever reason, this one stayed. I couldn't actually dislodge it somehow. Sometimes I think we have these big moments of realization, but we think, oh, that's a bit too much. Let me just get to work, or let me just do this thing, But for this reason, for whatever reason, this one wasn't going anywhere. So we have these big questions, and really these big questions are helping us, point into something really real about our lives, about ourselves, about experience itself. And it's actually pointing us, I think, these questions to what our deepest needs are, our deepest desires are. And if we can stay in touch with these questions, if we can actually take these questions seriously, if we can take action on these questions, a whole life, a whole path really potentially opens up for us. And when we attend these questions, this is what happened to me, immediate confidence, clarity and energy came, because I was more connected to something quite fundamental to being human. Actually, also, if there's more clarity and confidence and energy, you're more likely to, when you set out to do something, you're more likely to achieve it as well, because more of you is behind it. You're not thinking, oh, should I do this? Should I do that? You're very clear on what the important thing is. So you're willing to put yourself into it, engage in it. The other thing about these questions when we attend to them is that, we're more likely to take self and others into account. We're not just thinking of ourselves with these questions. Actually, I probably was thinking of myself with that question, but I knew, because it was connected to love, I knew somehow if I responded to that question, it would bring me in deeper connection with others. So somehow I was bringing others with me on this question as well. And then as you explore the question, as you attend to the question, more of you starts unfolding, more of you starts coming into being. Just the richness of pursuing it. You're going to be discovering things about yourself and about others and about life. And the process of exploring this question and attending to it, well, ultimately you become, the kind of answers that you're seeking. So, we all have, some level, these questions can emerge for all of us at any point. You're often sometimes in a crisis or some incredible experience. These questions can emerge. When we attend to it, we're actually getting more and more closely to the heart of what life is. And we're getting more and more opportunity to wake up to what really is, who we really are as human beings. And what really life is about. We're waking up. So actually, the point of life, from a Buddhist perspective, the point of life is awakening. And we can do that to the extent that we feel able, the fact that we feel engaged in that. We can do it to whatever degree we choose, but that is what the point of life is, awakening to who we really are and what life is really about, and then living that out. So for me that question had an immediate effect, because I was at the time pursuing a career that I was no longer engaged in. I was like, I don't want to do this anymore, but I'm on the track. I've invested time. Everyone's proud of me for doing this thing. I had a job lined up. A really good job that was, other people were like, oh, they really want that job, and I was like, I can't give it up. Maybe as someone was saying to me, do it for a while and then afterwards do something else. But actually I couldn't anymore, because I'd gotten so clear on the question and I knew that path would take me away from it. So suddenly, after months of kind of like indecision and angst and conflict, I made the decision. And I never really looked back. Actually, occasionally I'd when I was like, what am I going to do? Or where's my money going to come from? Occasionally I'd be like, you know, but it wouldn't last very long, and I'd carry on. So yeah, I ended up on the Buddhist path and pursuing this question, learning about myself, really learning about myself and the world, and then I got ordained. And the process of kind of like, you know, answering that question little by little, discovering its fullness. So the path of awakening is multifaceted, multidimensional, and it's got so many sort of opportunities and opens up so many possibilities, and it has its challenges as well. If you've been treading it for any length of time, you'll know that. Because if we're becoming becoming reality, we are discovering more of who we are, and we're discovering what gets in the way of who we really are. We're discovering what blocks us. So in order to free ourselves, we have to see what keeps us stuck, what keeps us held. In order to have love and connection, we have to be also discovering what keeps us disconnected, what keeps us separate from others. So there's challenges on this path, because it's kind of showing you're kind of like holding up a mirror, and you're seeing yourself in your potential fullness and beauty, majesty, but you're also seeing the parts of you that aren't that. Yeah. So definitely challenging. And what we're doing with becoming reality, we're seeing the suffering in our experiences, and we're having to really take that in. We're saying it's our own suffering, and then we're seeing, gosh, it's not just me that's suffering, actually. It's others. And so you're really becoming alive and attentive to the kind of reality of suffering. You also, as you're discovering more about yourself, you'll realise, gosh, I thought I was this person. And now I'm realising I'm not quite this person. I've got this aspect, and you're realising you're not fixed. There's nothing fixed about you. You're conditioned. And that you actually, the more you are on the path, the more you realise, well, you can choose whether to identify with all the things that have happened in your lives and all the conditions and conditioning, or you can choose to have a more spacious, let's say, attitude to that, to have a freer attitude, to let go of some of those conditions if they don't serve you. So we're seeing suffering, we're seeing that we're not fixed, and we're seeing that everything changes. Nothing stays the same. So we're seeing ourselves more and more. And for me, there's three things I've been learning in that process. I'm learning to see clearly myself and others. I'm learning to, on the basis of seeing clearly, that wisdom aspect, as it were, we're definitely bringing metta to that. We're definitely bringing loving kindness to that. Because in seeing ourselves clearly, that mirror, you could be like, oh my gosh, I don't like what I see in the mirror when we're seeing something it's suffering. But actually, if we're in tune, if we're connected to that question, we're kind of, whatever I see is also out there. It's also in the world. If I see suffering here, there's suffering elsewhere as well. So we think, this is a human thing. This is a human condition. I've got my particular version of it, but everybody has this. So your heart can open. So learning to see clearly, learning to have love in response to what we see, metta to what we see, and then learning to give, because you think, gosh, I want to. How do I give on the basis of what I'm seeing? And then letting go, because we know nothing lasts forever. So I got ordained, and on my ordination, when you're ordained, you sort of get there's a private little ceremony that happens at the beginning, then you have the public ceremony. We have the private ceremony, and in that time you get your name. You recite some ethical precepts, and it's a little ceremony that you do. Probably takes 20 minutes, half an hour. You trained for it for years, and then it sort of happens quite quickly. And I was there. I was very present. I got my name, and I loved my name straight away. I was very, very present. That's what I remember. I was very, very present to the whole thing. But what I also remember was going outside afterwards, and it was hills, surrounded by hills, this place. It was dark, it was night, the sky, the stars were out, the moon was up. And I remember feeling like, I walked out, I thought, gosh, that was over quite quickly, and yet... and yet, it felt like I'd been waiting my whole life for that. And I could feel like almost the cells of my body vibrating with the effect of it. And I just knew at that point that my life wouldn't be the same again. And I, looked up at the stars and the moon, and I declared at that point that whatever I need to make me transform fully in accordance with what I've just experienced, whatever I need, bring it. Body, speech and mind, bring it. I'm surrendering. You have to be careful what you what you ask for sometimes. But it was so like every part of me was there. Anyway, 9 months after that, I got pregnant, and it was unplanned. And, and I remembered that statement I made about whatever I need to transform myself, physically, emotionally, spiritually, every level, bring it. And there, 18 months later, my son was born. And I remember looking at him for the first time, and we had this moment when he was just born where, they don't really focus, but suddenly he was looking at me, and I was like looking at him, and it looked like he was saying, "Oh, so it's you," and I was just like, "Who are you? And who are we going to become? Who are we going to become? Who am I going to become now?" So it's been, I had to face a changed life circumstance, and in that, because I was wanting to become reality, then in a way that was a great opportunity for me to really see what does reality look like now. And for me it was like, I'm needing to learn to look after another being. I'm no longer the centre of the universe. I didn't realise how self-centred I was, quite frankly, until I had to start, attending to another. I've got to learn to let go of, to recognise my ego, recognise when I want to do things a certain way and it doesn't work out that way, recognise my responses to that. I have to learn to love more, so I can embrace this new phase and this new person that I'm becoming. Love is the answer. And I have to learn to let go. I have to learn to allow things to become and give, create, and let go. So that was one aspect of my life that I really had to this is a great opportunity to really see life more deeply and embrace. And I surrendered. I surrendered to that path, as it were. And it was a heart opening. And what I realised, it's not actually, yes, you could say it's particularly about being a parent, but I realised, no, this was my heart opening in general. Like, it's what I've been training for. It's what I've been learning to do in my practice, is for the heart to open, and when the heart opens, then to be able to take others in, to be able to connect deeply with others as I was unfolding, more and more. So becoming reality is a process of awakening, a process of awakening to oneself, whatever one's circumstances and situation is. And it's a process, to the degree we do it, that we engage in it, that will change us, that will challenge us, that will also help us see ourselves more clearly, and then be able to see others more, take others in more. And then recognise that we're in this very precious opportunity of life that actually does have an end point for us in this body right now. And the more we engage in the process of awakening, the more we can have that opportunity where we can find fulfillment, because we've tasted what life, the promise of it. And hopefully by the end, when that end comes, we can truly sort of be present to the opportunity we've had, and let go, which is my great wish, really, to let go without regret, not the Sinatra kind, but the kind of one that says, I fully lived, and I gave, and I became something in the process.